Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we got another shop talk video, and today's topic is going to be aftermarket parts. Are they good or are they crap? And should you always stick with dealer or something that is always quality? That's going to be a topic for today. Now, before we go ahead and get into this, guys, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below. Definitely smash that like button. It'll definitely help the channel out. And with that said, let's go ahead and start on today's topic. So what kind of parts should you be using? Should you use original parts from the dealer, or should you use genuine parts that are aftermarket supplied? Should you be using aftermarket suppliers, cheaper parts that are made by your local parts store or produced by a third-party company that produces parts for vendors and everything around? My take on this is quite simple, guys. If you are able to use a factory part, meaning an OEM part that you can buy from the dealer, or a source that sells dealer parts, that is typically the best way. That is the way I would like to handle it every single time. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way because there's budgets, and sometimes OEM parts are just extremely expensive. Now, I just had a Chevy Aveo in my shop that we replaced the coolant tank, aka the surge tank, as what Chevy calls it. And I called the dealer up and I ordered one because it's fairly inexpensive. It's under $100, and I figured let me just go ahead and get an OEM part on it. It's a little bit better. Then I waited around, and the parts department calls me back and says, hey, sorry, we don't have that. We thought we had it, we don't, so we're gonna cancel the order. I was like, okay, great, I've been waiting, now I gotta find one. So I called my local parts store up, tried finding an AC Delco. No one had anything in stock. The only thing that they had were Dorman brand. Now, Dorman, for a lot of you that work on cars, you guys may say, oh no, why? It's crap. Or some of you may say, oh, okay, that works. Now, here's the thing that I figured out when it comes to this, guys. When you're buying a Dorman part, depending on what type of part it is, you may actually get a stronger part than you originally had on your car from the OEM. Or you may wind up buying something that's just as good. And then there's also the third trifecta here, that it just may be absolutely crap. It just really depends. Now, I don't really have a list on what is great and what sucks and this and that, but I will tell you from my experience, Dorman makes some solid pieces that are even more upgraded than the original ones, but it just really varies on what it is. And the best example of this was that Chevy Aveo. If I had bought the AC Delco one and the dealer had shipped it out and they had it in stock, I would have never known that Dorman makes a better tank for Chevys when it comes to it. The original Chevy one was just molded plastic. Dorman actually had upgraded their model to the point where you had some metal sleeves in there where the hose clamps and the hoses attached to the bottle, and it was just more sturdy and more rigid. Now, I wasn't planning on using the Dorman in that situation, but I just had to wind up picking it up, and I was actually impressed. That part specifically was a really good part. It was made correctly, and it looked sturdier than the original one. So it worked out in that scenario. When it comes to some of their stuff, it can be really chintzy. The best guideline that I can tell you guys for aftermarket parts as far as Dorman, just look at what it is and see how it feels in the look over. If it feels kind of cheap and looks kind of cheap, it probably is going to be cheap. You can usually tell when it's overbuilt or underbuilt. So that's my advice when it comes to aftermarket parts, specifically Dorman. I wanted to feature Dorman separately, guys, because they are one of the bigger aftermarket manufacturers out there. You'll find them everywhere. So that's why I went on a little snippet for them right there. But either way, so let's take it into this perspective as well. Let's say you got two parts stores, let's say AutoZone and Napa. What I find is that there are manufacturers like Dorman, and sometimes some even other ones, even bigger name brand. And what they'll do is they'll create their own part, put it in their own box with their own brand, and they will also make it for AutoZone and for Napa in their own brand. Meaning, let's say like AutoZone has Duralast, and I think Napa has Advantage Pro or something. I don't know what the technical term is, but it's basically the same part. The box changes, and then what they wind up doing is, putting their own price on it. The best example that I have for this is my filters that I use here on a daily basis. What you guys normally see on the other bay that I have stacked up are some filters that aren't a national brand, but they are actually made by Wix, and I purposely buy them because Wix makes some of, I guess you can say, the okay and the good oil filters At least I like to use them. I feel their quality is really good. They make them for Napa and a few other companies as well. But the company that I use, they actually have rebranded Wix filters. It's the exact same filter that you would pay, $15 or $20 for at the parts store, because it's Wix and it's a higher premium brand, with just a different sticker on it. But it's made in the same exact plant that that $20 one is made in, except it has a different sticker than the one that I'm buying, but it's virtually the same filter. And this happens a lot in the parts community. So sometimes going aftermarket isn't necessarily bad. Most cars that I work on, typically they're getting aftermarket parts. Not everyone that walks through this door and walks into my shop is going to get dealer only parts. Now there's some cases where I won't budge, but like, hey, I gotta get this from the dealer. But when it comes down to most parts, guys, you gotta know what you're buying. Most of the parts stores are always gonna have some sort of mix mash. Now, one thing that I will tell you that I have found to be true on quite a bit of some parts, and Napa is actually really good about this. Sometimes you will buy a Napa branded something. Let's say it's let's say a map sensor. If you buy a map sensor from Napa and it's in the insulin box, it's the blue. I think it has like a polar bear on there. It's been a while since I bought one from them. I don't use Napa primarily. I use them for more specialty stuff. But either way, what you wind up getting if you purchase the Insulin Napa brand one is if you bought that map sensor, about 90% of the time, guys, I can almost guarantee you that you are going to get an exact OEM part. I've bought map sensors and little engine sensors from Napa before under the Insulin brand, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, if it's Einschlin or Insulin, but either way, when you buy them in that box, if you open up the box and look at it, even before you buy it, you can do it at the parts store. Just have them bring it out, open the box, and you will see if it's an OEM part or not. I bought a Toyota map sensor that was a Denso unit. The Denso was somewhere like $250 to $300 if I'm not mistaken, and I bought it at Napa for half that. And it's the same exact one, just a different rebox. So there's a lot of reboxing and a lot of savings, even at the parts stores, if you know what to look out for. Now, some parts are going to be great, some parts are going to be horrible. What I typically find is that if you're buying, pads and rotors from most places, as long as you buy the premium line of their brake products, they're usually pretty good. Calipers and suspension parts, guys, they're typically the same. It's either going to be a TRW or a Moss or something. There's only so many companies that make steering and suspension components. So relatively, no matter where you go, you're just paying different prices. Now, if you wind up going to, let's say, like AutoZone, and you have let's say a TRW Premium, a Duralast, and a ValueCraft. The way I'm going to say it is the ValueCraft, unless you want that part to last a couple months, don't even go for it. I would probably just chuck it in the trash. I wouldn't even buy it. Between the TRW and the Duralast, one thing that you guys have to know, it's the same. Usually TRW or Moss makes their suspension parts and they rebrand them. So even if you're buying an AutoZone brand and they have a TRW brand and there's a $30 difference in prices, more than likely you got the same part. One way that they can save some money on producing it for AutoZone is possibly by let's say instead of putting a Zerk fitting like the TRW one comes with, they don't provide a Zerk fitting on the AutoZone one. There's going to be some small minute changes. Sometimes the materials may be a little different, or the design of, let's say on a tie rod, you might get a short boot or inlet boot or whatever you want to call it, temp boot that doesn't really have to bubble up if you bought the premium TRW. And if you bought the AutoZone one, you just might have a regular rubber plug that will go on there that'll be a boot. So there's going to be some subtle differences, but typically it's the same part. And most of the time I find it's just exactly the same part, they just rebox it. Because at the end of the day, they just want to get the product out there. So not all aftermarket parts are garbage. The best way that I can put it out there, guys, any aftermarket part, you want to look at it and you want to inspect it. If it looks cheap and it feels cheap, again, it's probably cheap. Usually you can tell quality. Even with rotors, which is a common thing now, a lot of people say don't buy aftermarket rotors because they're skimping on metal. And that's true to an extent. I had a pair of rotors I did. It was I believe a Hyundai Tucson. It was front rotors. I had done the brake job on it about 3 years ago, and I ordered the parts from the exact same place the first time and the second time I redid the brakes. And one thing I noticed when I took off my old rotor, even though it was worn down and used, and I'm holding my new rotor in my hand, there was more weight to the old one, and the new one felt like a featherweight. And I called my supplier and I tried to see if there were any other rotors that they had. I even went up to like their super premium one that's like painted black, and you winds up paying more money just for it being spray painted all around. And to be honest with you guys, it wasn't that much heavier than the one they originally sent me. My old one was super heavy. So that is a fact. Sometimes they are skimping on some materials, especially nowadays. But what I did in that scenario, I had to outsource it from a different warehouse that I typically don't buy from, and I had the correct weight on there. So like I said, if it looks and feels cheap, it probably is, so you want to be careful. Value line, anything with value in it, like value craft, I call it value crap. It just doesn't work out. So be very mindful of stuff like that. If you're going to be buying from a parts store, you want to stay at least at the name brand stuff, which is rebranded. Like let's say if I walk to AutoZone, I'm not going to buy a value craft. I'll more than likely buy the middle brand, which is going to be the Duralast. And then they'll have the super premium name brand one, which would be TRW or whoever makes that part, like Moog or whatever. Although I don't really find too much of Moog at AutoZone, just as an example. So I mean, those are pretty much the price. The parts differences. It's not really that major. Never look at the aftermarket and the parts stores and say they got cheap parts, guys, because typically you'll find the same parts. It's even gotten to a point where I have bought tie rods from the dealer, and I bought TRW ones, and come to find out, TRW supplies the OEM. So they're making them for the OEM suppliers and manufacturers as well. So sometimes, you know, it's all part sharing, and that's the big thing too, especially if you drive like an American car. Typically like a Chevy, you will find parts that are made in America, and a lot of your big companies, like I wouldn't be surprised, and I can't say this is a fact, guys, but it would not surprise me if Dorman is making certain Chevy parts, or Moog is making certain Chevy parts, simply because, you know, they're inexpensive and they're easy to produce. And I'm sure these parts places love it when they get an OEM supplier and they're like, hey, we want to buy like millions upon billions of these parts, can you make them and do them for this much? I'm sure they'll be more than happy to take that and get it done because it's money. So most of your OEM suppliers are also your aftermarket suppliers. That's a big thing to take away from this. And like I said, a tip is always buy the medium line. If you can afford to buy the higher premium version, go ahead and do so. If you're buying things like brakes, always go with the premium one. Trust me on that, because if you buy like the medium ones or the cheaper ones, they're just gonna, you know, make a bunch of sounds. They don't give you all the brackets. It's just a bunch of issues. So that will hopefully help you guys out when it comes to purchasing parts. Now with that said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. It was a quick short video just to kind of give you guys a little brief explanation on this, so it helps you guys out if you guys are purchasing any parts here in the future or anything. But with that said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Please comment, like, and subscribe. Definitely helps the channel grow, guys, and I do want to thank everyone because my channel is growing and I have you guys to thank. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.